Have you ever felt that inexplicable pull toward someone? A connection that seemed to bypass logic and speak directly to your soul? Perhaps it was a look exchanged across a room, a sudden surge of emotion that couldn't be explained, or the haunting sense that this person was made for you. These moments feel fated, as if life itself has conspired to bring two hearts together. Yet what happens when that connection is not mutual? What happens when, despite everything you feel, the other person does not choose you in the same way? This question touches a hidden truth that few are willing to face. It leads us into a psychological trap that has sabotaged countless relationships without anyone realizing what is happening. Carl Jung, the revolutionary thinker who explored the depths of the unconscious mind, uncovered a secret about human attraction that explains why men sometimes pursue women with burning obsession only to abandon them once they have won their affection. It is a pattern so subtle, yet so destructive, that it continues to shape the romantic destiny of millions today. If you are single, struggling in love, or searching for stability, understanding this hidden pattern may save you from years of confusion and heartbreak. Around 90% of women will go through their entire lives without ever realizing that unconscious psychological forces are quietly directing the course of their relationships. They will misinterpret obsession as love, mistake projection for intimacy, and suffer when the intensity vanishes as suddenly as it arrived. The truth is unsettling. The man who seems madly in love with you today may not truly be in love with you at all. Instead, he may be enthralled by a psychological phantom, an image created by his own unconscious mind, projected onto you with blinding force. And when the illusion dissolves, as it inevitably does, abandonment becomes almost certain. The cruel irony is that the more intensely a man showers affection in the beginning, the greater the risk that what he loves is only his own projection, not the real person before him. And to see this clearly requires courage, because once you recognize it, you will never look at romance the same way again. Jung's discoveries reveal why rejection so often fuels obsession, why men sometimes seem to value those who are distant more than those who are devoted, and why so many relationships collapse under the weight of their own intensity. These are not random mysteries of the heart. They are patterns rooted in the collective unconscious, ancient forces that shape attraction without our awareness. The first of these forces Jung identified is the projection of the anima, the inner feminine image that every man carries deep within his psyche. When a woman pulls away, a strange thing happens in the male unconscious. She becomes a blank canvas, and onto that emptiness, the anima is projected. In her absence, his mind begins to paint her with idealized qualities that no real person could embody. He becomes captivated, not by the actual woman, but by the fantasy he has unconsciously created. This explains why so many men seem to chase more fiercely the moment they sense distance. The longing they feel is not for the woman herself, but for the perfection of their own inner image. And once they succeed, once closeness replaces distance, the projection collides with reality. The illusion cannot survive contact with imperfection. What follows is often a collapse so sudden and painful, it leaves the other person wondering if the love was ever real. Think about your past experiences. Have you ever felt that a man adored an idealized version of you rather than the authentic, complicated person you are? Did you sense that his passion was more about what he imagined than what he truly saw? If so, you may have been caught in this psychological trap, but the anima projection is only the beginning. Jung also revealed that the male psyche is powerfully drawn to scarcity. When someone is unavailable, whether emotionally distant or simply unpredictable, it awakens a primitive circuit in the unconscious mind that equates rarity with immense value. It is the same instinct that makes people covet rare treasures or fight fiercely for something that is hard to obtain. The paradox is heartbreaking a woman who is open, loving, and consistently present can be perceived as less valuable, while one who withholds or withdraws becomes a prize to be pursued at any cost. This mechanism of emotional scarcity explains why so many women are hurt when their devotion is met with indifference. It is not a matter of personal worth, but of unconscious psychology. The male mind, conditioned over millennia, equates distance with significance, and yet, when the distance disappears, so too does the intensity. Behind these patterns lies something even deeper, a mythological archetype that Jung called the unattainable maiden, buried in the collective unconscious. This archetype creates an almost otherworldly attraction when a woman seems out of reach to the man caught in this projection. She is no longer simply herself, but a figure of destiny, promising transformation, wholeness, even redemption. The intensity feels like magic, but it is not love in its true form. It is an archetypal projection, as fragile as a dream. The tragedy is that many women confuse this intensity with authenticity. They believe that the depth of a man's obsession proves the depth of his love, when in reality it may prove only the depth of his unconscious projection. And when the projection inevitably fades, the relationship collapses, leaving behind confusion, heartbreak, and the haunting question of why passion turned to indifference. These patterns are not rare, they are everywhere. They explain why so many women experience cycles of being adored, pursued, and then abandoned. They explain why the most intoxicating beginnings often lead to the most painful endings, and they reveal why. Without awareness, people remain trapped in destructive dynamics that repeat across years, even decades. But understanding these hidden forces is not about cynicism or despair. It is about liberation. For when you can recognize projection, you are no longer controlled by it. You can begin to tell the difference between being loved for who you are and being idolized as an image. You can step out of the cycle of obsession and abandonment and move toward the possibility of genuine connection. This journey begins by shining a light on the unconscious patterns that shape attraction. And as we continue, we will dive deeper into the shadow wounds, the hidden archetypes, and the mysterious projections that define so much of human love. By the end, you will see relationships in a way that few ever do, not through the haze of illusion, but through the clarity of truth. If the Anima projection and the archetype of the unattainable maiden explain the intoxicating beginnings of many relationships, then the shadow reveals why those beginnings so often collapse into disappointment and pain. Jung described the shadow as the hidden part of ourselves, the fears, wounds, and rejected aspects of our psyche that we deny or repress. Yet these very parts of us find ways to surface, especially in relationships. For men, one of the most powerful shadow wounds is the fear of abandonment and inadequacy. This wound often begins in childhood, formed during the natural separation from the mother, though necessary for growth. This separation leaves a trace of longing, a sense of never again being fully enveloped by unconditional love. It is a wound so deep that many spend their lives unconsciously trying to heal it. When a man encounters a woman who withdraws or withholds affection, the wound is reactivated. Strangely, instead of driving him away, it pulls him closer with obsessive force. He becomes compelled to win over the one who stirs the wound, as if conquering her resistance could erase his hidden feelings of rejection. Jung would call this the shadow pattern, the wound seeking the blade. In other words, the psyche compulsively seeks out the very experience that caused the injury, hoping to rewrite the story. But rather than healing, the cycle often deepens the wound. Have you ever known someone who was inexplicably drawn to partners who treated them poorly, who rejected them, or who remained unavailable on the surface? It makes no sense. Why would anyone chase after pain but beneath the surface? The shadow is at work, driving a desperate attempt to transform rejection into acceptance, inadequacy into worth. It is a battle fought not with the present partner, but with the ghosts of the past. This cycle can be destructive, even addictive, The more rejection a man feels, the more determined he becomes to reverse it. His pursuit grows more intense, more obsessive, until finally he achieves what he thinks he wants: acceptance, closeness, intimacy. But the victory is hollow. Once the distance disappears, so too does the emotional charge that fueled his pursuit. What remains is not healing, but emptiness, often followed by disinterest or even repulsion. The woman, once idealized, is now seen as ordinary, even disappointing, and the cycle begins again with someone new. This explains why so many relationships are marked by extremes, fiery beginnings that fade into coldness, declarations of undying love followed by sudden withdrawal. It is not that the feelings were false, rather, they were fueled by unconscious forces that could not survive the light of reality. When fantasy collides with truth, the illusion dissolves. But Jung did not stop at explaining these painful patterns. He also offered a path toward transformation. At the heart of his psychology is the concept of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole by integrating all aspects of themselves, both conscious and unconscious. In relationships, individuation plays a crucial role. For men, it involves confronting and integrating the inner feminine, the anima, rather than projecting it outward onto women. For women, it involves recognizing and integrating the inner masculine, the animus, rather than projecting it onto men. When a woman pulls away, something extraordinary happens in the male psyche. She becomes a mirror, reflecting his disowned inner feminine back to him without realizing it. He projects his need for wholeness onto her, mistaking her for the missing part of himself. But if he fails to recognize this projection, he uses her not as a partner, but as a tool in his unconscious journey. The danger is that the woman becomes trapped in a role she never chose, burdened with the responsibility of embodying qualities that are not hers but his. This is why some relationships feel like they carry the weight of destiny, as though one partner has become the key to the other's salvation. The intensity may feel transcendent, but it is not truly about the partner. It is about the parts of the self that are being projected outward. The question then becomes painfully clear: are you being loved for who you are, or for the mirror you provide? What few realize is that projection works both ways. Just as men project the anima, women often project the animus, their inner masculine, onto men. That rush of attraction that feels like recognition, the sense that someone completes you, may actually be the recognition of your own unclaimed strengths reflected back through another person. What feels like love at first sight may, in truth, be projection at first sight. This realization can be unsettling, even disorienting. It calls into question the foundation of so many romantic experiences, but it also opens the door to freedom. For when you withdraw your projections and reclaim the qualities you once sought in others, you become whole within yourself. You no longer need another person to complete you. Instead, you can choose a partner who complements you, not one who temporarily fills an unconscious void. Imagine for a moment how relationships would change if both partners entered them not from a place of incompleteness, but from wholeness. Instead of using each other as mirrors for disowned parts of themselves, they could see one another clearly, as they truly are. Instead of chasing intensity born of projection, they could cultivate intimacy rooted in reality. This is what Jung called the sacred union, not the fusion of two incomplete halves, but the meeting of two complete individuals. And yet, reaching this level of consciousness requires effort. It requires recognizing the signs of projection before they entangle you in another cycle of obsession and disappointment. Excessive idealization, obsessive pursuit after rejection, fascination with mystery, claims of mystical transformation, and the inevitable collapse once intimacy is achieved. These are not signs of true love. They are signs that projection is at work. The challenge, then, is to ask yourself the hard questions. Am I being seen for who I truly am? Or for the image someone has created of me? Am I loving this person? Or am I loving the qualities of myself that I have unconsciously projected onto them? The answers are rarely simple, but they are the key to breaking free. As we go deeper, we will explore how these unconscious forces can create not just cycles of obsession, but actual psychological addiction and emotional dependency as powerful as any drug, fueled by the alternation of closeness and rejection. This is where the pattern becomes most dangerous and where the need for awareness becomes most urgent. The addictive quality of these patterns is what makes them so difficult to escape. Obsession fueled by projection doesn't simply fade quietly, it burns, consumes, and creates dependency that can feel almost impossible to resist. Many women have lived through this cycle without ever naming it, mistaking its intensity for love when in truth it is closer to psychological compulsion. Picture this: a man meets a woman who shows interest, but soon begins to withdraw. She doesn't answer messages right away, cancels plans, or simply gives off an air of emotional distance instead of losing interest. His attention multiplies. He floods her phone with calls, sends unexpected flowers, declares feelings of destiny after only weeks of knowing her. He insists she is unlike anyone he has ever met, that he feels complete when she is near. His behavior looks like devotion, but beneath it lies projection and scarcity. The more unavailable she seems, the more his unconscious wound is activated, and the more desperate he becomes to possess her. At first, this pursuit can feel flattering, even exhilarating. To be the center of someone's obsession is intoxicating, especially when their attention comes wrapped in grand gestures and passionate declarations. But what is rarely understood is that this passion is not sustainable, because it is not rooted in reality. It is rooted in illusion, fueled by the unconscious desire to heal an old wound through conquest. And once the conquest is achieved, the fuel burns out. This is why so many women experience abrupt shifts in their relationships. The same man who once seemed incapable of spending a day without her suddenly grows distant. The once constant messages stop. The grand declarations vanish. Confusion sets in. What changed? Did she do something wrong? Was the love ever real? The painful answer is that the intensity was never about her in the first place. It was about his own projections. When the illusion could no longer survive, the passion collapsed. To understand the addictive nature of this cycle, we must look deeper at how the brain responds. Each phase of pursuit and rejection releases powerful chemicals: dopamine during the chase, oxytocin in moments of connection, cortisol during withdrawal. The highs and lows create a neurochemical roller coaster that mirrors the effects of addictive substances. The man becomes hooked on the cycle, not the person, and the woman, often unknowingly, becomes the trigger for his addiction. Have you ever been in a relationship where the other person seemed more energized by the struggle than by the peace that came after? Where every argument was followed by an intense reconciliation, every withdrawal followed by a flood of affection. This push and pull dynamic can feel passionate, even fated, but in truth, it is a loop of projection and shadow. It feels alive because it mimics the rhythm of an addiction. This realization leads to one of Jung's most profound insights, that true intimacy cannot exist while we are trapped in projection. As long as one person is being used as a screen for another's unconscious needs, the relationship cannot be fully real. The intensity may be powerful, but it is unstable. It is not rooted in seeing the other person as they are, but in using them to fill in the missing pieces of one's own psyche. And yet, there is a paradox here. The very pain of these cycles, the heartbreak that follows projection, can become the catalyst for growth. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, often begins when our illusions collapse. When a projection dissolves and we are left with disappointment, it forces us to confront what was missing within ourselves all along. The disappointment is painful, but it can also be the beginning of healing. Consider a woman who realizes that every man who has pursued her intensely later lost interest once she reciprocated. For years, she may blame herself, believing she did something wrong or that she wasn't good enough to sustain his love. But when she learns about projection, she begins to see the truth. It was never about her lack of worth. It was about his unconscious dance with his anima and his unresolved shadow. This knowledge transforms her experience of relationships. Instead of internalizing rejection, she begins to recognize the signs of projection early and steps away before becoming entangled. Or think of the man who finally sees that his endless attraction to distant, unavailable partners is not fate, but shadow. He realizes that he has been seeking healing for an old wound by chasing those who echo the rejection he once felt. At first, this insight feels devastating, but slowly it becomes liberating. By bringing the shadow into awareness, he breaks the cycle. He no longer confuses obsession with love. He begins to choose differently. This is the turning point Jung's psychology offers. Awareness becomes the doorway out of compulsion. When you see projection for what it is, it loses its hold. When you recognize that obsession is a reflection of someone else's inner world, not a reflection of your worth, you reclaim your power. And when you withdraw your own projections, choosing to see others as they truly are rather than as carriers of your inner fantasies, you begin to build relationships rooted in reality. The path to this kind of relationship is not easy. It requires letting go of illusions, resisting the lure of intensity, and embracing the slower, quieter work of building genuine intimacy. It requires asking hard questions. Am I being loved for who I am? Or for the image I represent? Am I loving this person as they are? Or am I seeing in them the qualities I have not yet claimed in myself? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they are the beginning of freedom. For the greatest tragedy is not that projections dissolve, it is that so many people never realize they were caught in projections at all. They repeat the same cycles again and again, mistaking patterns for fate, never awakening to the truth that could set them free. As we move forward, we will uncover the final layer of this mystery, the possibility of transcending projection altogether. Jung called it the conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites, where relationships transform from unconscious cycles into conscious choices. To reach this place requires courage, but it offers something far greater than obsession. It offers the possibility of real love. If obsession, projection, and shadow patterns explain why so many relationships collapse, then individuation offers the only true path toward transformation. To understand this, we must look beyond the dance of pursuit and rejection, beyond the intoxication of fantasy, and into the deeper work of becoming whole. Jung believed that within every person lives both masculine and feminine energies. For men, the feminine lives as the anima, the inner figure of womanhood, shaped by both personal experiences and the collective unconscious. For women, the masculine exists as the animus, a composite of ideals, expectations, and archetypes of manhood. These inner figures shape attraction, but they also distort it, because they are rarely recognized for what they are. Instead of integrating them, we project them outward. The woman becomes the man's anima, the man becomes the woman's animus, and both mistake projection for love. This is why first encounters can feel so magnetic, so uncanny. The sudden sense that someone was made for you often has less to do with who they are and more to do with the parts of yourself you've projected onto them. The thrill of recognition is real, but what you recognize is not the other, it is yourself. To withdraw these projections requires immense courage. It means admitting that the qualities we idolize in others, the strength we admire in men, the mystery we adore in women may in fact belong to us, waiting to be acknowledged within. When we stop demanding that others carry our projections, we begin the slow, difficult process of integration. We claim our disowned traits. We embrace both the masculine and the feminine within. We become whole. From this wholeness emerges a completely different kind of relationship. It is no longer a desperate search for someone to complete us, but a conscious choice to walk beside another human being as equals. Love becomes less about possession and more about presence, less about intensity and more about intimacy. The fire does not burn out because it was never built on illusion, it was built on reality. But reaching this place requires resisting the seduction of projection. Consider the cycle again. A man showers a woman with affection when she is distant, but cools when she draws near. A woman feels completed by a man she barely knows. Convinced destiny has brought them together. Both are caught in projections that cannot last. Without awareness, they will suffer the collapse again and again. With awareness, however, they can begin to choose differently. Ask yourself how many of your past relationships were built on projection rather than reality. How many times did you feel you were loved not for who you truly are, but for the image someone created of you? And how many times did you, in turn, fall for someone not as they were, but as you imagined them to be? These questions are difficult, but they are the beginning of liberation. For liberation comes not in manipulating these dynamics by pulling away to trigger pursuit, by playing hard to get to maintain value, but in transcending them entirely. Manipulation keeps the cycle alive. Awareness breaks it. To step out of projection is to step into reality. And reality, though less intoxicating, is infinitely more sustaining. Here lies the paradox. The love born of projection feels larger, brighter, more magical in the beginning. It is the kind of love sung about in songs, written about in novels, whispered about in secret, but its very intensity is a sign of its fragility, like mist in the morning sun. It cannot survive contact with reality. Genuine love, by contrast, may feel quieter at first, even ordinary, but it grows stronger over time, deepening as two people see each other not as projections, but as complex, imperfect, and real. Jung called this ultimate integration the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites within the self. When a man integrates his anima, he no longer needs to chase women as mirrors of his missing pieces. When a woman integrates her animus, she no longer projects her unclaimed strength onto men. Both enter relationships not out of need, but out of wholeness. And from this wholeness emerges the possibility of genuine intimacy. This is the wisdom most people never discover. They spend their lives caught in cycles of projection and disappointment, believing love has betrayed them, never realizing it was unconscious psychology at work. They chase intensity, mistaking it for depth, and flee from stability, mistaking it for dullness, and in doing so, they miss the possibility of the one thing they long for most: authentic connection. The great challenge of our time is to bring consciousness into this dance, to recognize projection when it arises, to withdraw it before it distorts, to see others as they are rather than as screens for our fantasies. It is not an easy task, but it is the path to freedom. As we approach the conclusion of this journey, we must confront the most difficult question of all. How do we live differently once we see the truth? What does it mean to love without projection? To step beyond the cycles of obsession and abandonment into something more enduring. This is where Jung's insights lead us, and it is here that we will find not only the key to relationships, but the key to ourselves. To live differently once we see the truth means daring to step outside the ancestral patterns that have governed human love for millennia. Projection is as old as desire itself. Woven into myths, stories, and fairy tales, the night falls for the unattainable maiden. The wanderer chases the shadow of a love he can never hold. These tales endure because they mirror the unconscious forces at play in every human heart. But Jung offered us something radical, the possibility of consciousness, the possibility of interrupting the pattern. It begins with awareness. The next time you feel the intoxicating rush of being adored, ask yourself, is this person truly seeing me? Or are they seeing a ghost of their own mind? The next time you feel yourself falling with dizzying speed for someone you barely know, pause and ask, am I seeing them? Or am I projecting my own unclaimed qualities onto their image? These questions cut through the haze. They reveal whether you are building on reality or illusion. Once you recognize projection, you can make a choice. You can step away from the cycle before it ensnares you. Or you can step more fully into reality, meeting the other person with clear eyes rather than with fantasies. This shift may feel less dramatic, less overwhelming, but it opens the door to something deeper. It opens the door to love that grows rather than burns out, to intimacy that strengthens rather than collapses. Imagine a relationship where you no longer need to perform or to fit an idealized image. Imagine being loved for your complexities, your flaws, your contradictions, for your humanity, not your perfection. This is what becomes possible when projection is withdrawn. And imagine loving another in the same way, not for the way they reflect your inner archetypes, but for who they truly are. This is the promise of individuation. The liberation Jung pointed toward is not only relational, but profoundly personal. When you withdraw your projections, you reclaim the qualities you once sought in others, the courage you admired in him, the mystery you adored in her. These are aspects of yourself, waiting to be recognized and lived. As you integrate them, you become whole. And from this wholeness arises a new kind of magnetism, not born of desperation, but of authenticity. You no longer chase or cling, you attract by being. True intimacy is only possible when you no longer need it to complete you. This is the paradox few understand. When you are whole within yourself, you can finally approach another without demand, without illusion, without the burden of projection. Love becomes a choice, not a compulsion, and in that choice lies its power. Of course, choosing reality over fantasy is not easy. It requires giving up the intoxication of projection, the fireworks of obsession, the illusion of destiny. But what you gain in exchange is priceless, the steady fire of authentic connection. The kind of bond that endures not because it dazzles, but because it is true. Ask yourself now how many of your past heartbreaks were the result of projection. How many times did you mistake intensity for depth, obsession for devotion, fantasy for love? And what would your future look like if you stepped out of that cycle, choosing instead to love and be loved in reality? The answer to that question is your freedom. Jung believed that bringing light to the unconscious was the highest moral task. In relationships, this means seeing through projection, not only to protect ourselves, but to honor others. For when we project, we do not love, we use. We turn people into characters in our inner dramas rather than meeting them as human beings. To withdraw projection is an ethical act, a spiritual act. It is the foundation of authentic connection. This is the ultimate choice before you. You can remain in the old dance of projection and rejection, mistaking cycles of intensity and collapse for the nature of love. Or you can step into a new paradigm, where love is not about fantasy, but about presence, not about need, but about freedom. The first path offers the thrill of fireworks that quickly fade. The second offers the steady glow of a flame that lasts. The deepest truth is this: the strength, wisdom, and love you once sought in others have always lived within you. Projection only concealed them, scattering them across the faces of those you desired. But now you know where to look. Your wholeness has never been outside of you, it has always been here, waiting to be reclaimed. So I leave you with this challenge. Will you continue repeating the patterns of unconscious attraction? Or will you take the path of consciousness, building relationships rooted in truth rather than illusion? The answer you choose will shape not only your love life, but your entire emotional destiny. If this exploration has opened your eyes, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments below. Your story may be the wake-up call someone else desperately needs. And if you want to continue this journey into Jung's hidden psychology of love and attraction, be sure to like this video, share it with others who may need it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next installment. Together, we can step beyond illusion into authentic connection.